All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to. I'm gonna be blunt. Welcome to another drama rant. Um, sure. To get right down to it, and this, I'm not 100% certain I would call this drama as much as it is. I saw something on Twitter where one of the Critical Role cast mentioned some of the complaints effectively they'd been getting about something, and I had very similar. I have seen those complaints other places, not Critical Role related. I just wanted to talk about it. So some disclaimers right off. First things first, this is about Critical Role drama. The reason I'm doing this, first things first, it's super popular. People love it when I talk about Critical Role drama. And it involves Exandria Unleashed, which I have not watched all of yet. Watching 4-hour-long D&D games is something I used to be able to do, and I just can't. My anxiety is so extreme that watching anything for that long, I just can't do it, no matter how much I love it. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about involves stuff that I haven't personally experienced in my watch through, but makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, I'm doing this because first of all, it's popular. Second of all, I have a unique viewpoint on this that I haven't seen expressed, and it actually relates directly to D&D did a deep dive. So yeah, if you're not a huge fan of quote unquote drama stuff, go ahead and leave. Not a whole lot here is going to be absolutely essential to hear. Yeah. So, let's talk about what I saw. For those of you that don't know, the third, or the, sorry, let's try this again. The second campaign of Critical Role ended a couple months ago, which was kind of, quote-unquote, subtitled The Mighty Nine, because that's what they called their adventuring party. The first one was I can't even remember their team name anymore. That's how bad my memory has gotten because of my anxiety and all this other stuff going on. Anyway, so in between talking about their next campaign and the end of their previous campaign, they had this new limited series that they did called Exandria Unlimited, which was unique in a lot of different ways. Probably the biggest, change that they made for Exandria Unlimited was Matt Mercer was not the DM. Matt Mercer was actually a player. And they brought in a new DM, which I'm really sorry. I cannot remember anyone's names right now, and I don't have their names in front of me other than Amy Carrero's name, because she's who involved in this, and I have her tweet in front of me. So please forgive me for not remembering the DM of Exandria Unlimited. She was very good at what she did. I just feel names have always been hard for me, and ever since the Benzos, I have a hard time remembering anything, and names have just gone out the window. My closest friends, I forget their names. So anyway, so they have a different DM who was brilliant. They have Matt Mercer was there, and I believe Ashley Johnson, and I think those are the only two regular Critical Role cast members. Liam might have been there. I am so out of it right now, I can't remember. But then they had Amy Carino and at least one other person that I can't remember his name. But it was a 5-person party. It was a really cool story set in Exandria. and it was the first time another DM had told a story in Matt's world of Exandria on the Critical Role channel. So there was all these firsts, and it was a very diverse cast and all these other really cool things. So anyway, Amy was brand spanking new to role-playing games in general. She'd never done it, but she is an actor. I believe she's a voice actor, and which is really common for all the Critical Role stuff. I don't believe they've had a non-actor friend on the show ever, because they're all actors and they have all these actor friends. And for those of you that don't know the training and the work that goes into being an actor, one of the things you do become an expert in is telling stories and inhabiting characters. It's literally what you're paid to do. So actors in general tend to make really good role players as long as they're invested in it. And I think I've watched 3 episodes of it, and I think there's a grand total of 6 or 7. I can't remember. And I plan on watching the rest. Anyway, Amy Amy committed one of the cardinal sins of role playing, which is her character was not optimized. Now, for those of you going, well, wait a minute, that's not a cardinal sin of role-playing. Cardinal sin of role-playing is something like, stealing from the party, or no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But there is a very, very vocal minority that believes if you play a non-optimized character, you're committing a cardinal sin of role-playing. And I absolutely despise that idea. But it is very, very prevalent. I've kind of given up. I've given up on Facebook. It's horrible. I've mostly given up on Twitter because it is also a cesspool of just disgustingness. Reddit, however, I've been enjoying, mostly because the only subreddits on Reddit that I am subscribed to are RPG horror stories, because every so often it's nice to see that other people have had shit experiences in role-playing games. r/D&D Next, which was the first 5th edition subreddit, and they've never changed their name because it started off as D&D Next, and then r/D&D Memes, because ever so often they're funny. And r/D&D Next, and I bounce around to other RPG related subreddits as well. I'm also subscribed to the Final Fantasy 14 cross D&D subreddit, but it's mostly because I interact with them a lot, so it didn't make sense to not be subscribed to that. But anyway, I see it a lot in r/D&D Next, and I see it in other RPG subreddits that I will go to every so often, just because there's a cross post, or I'm bored and I'm looking for stories and other things like that. And it's this idea that suboptimal builds are horrendous and horrible, and it bleeds into the idea that, well, this class is underpowered because there is no optimal build for it. And I recently actually saw a post talking about a subclass, actually in the Final Fantasy 14 crossover one, where they were talking about one of the subclasses was super underpowered because it was basically just like this base class, but it can't do as much damage in a single swing. So it's obviously underpowered and worthless. And I made up a post there where I mentioned specifically, well, no, it's not underpowered. It just can't do as much burst damage. And that's not how you compare quote-unquote power levels of classes in tabletop RPGs. Damage per round or damage per action or things like that, or DPS in general, which is damage per second, which is how it's treated literally everywhere else, is a great tool for measuring things in video games. It's one of the reasons DPS meters are so popular in most MMOs, because it is an extremely easy way to see who is contributing the most to reducing an enemy's hit points to 0, which in a video game is generally the only way you beat a boss monster. Now, there may be other mechanics tied to that, like the only way to do the most damage is by, moving a certain way, or perhaps there's things you can interact with which will do major amounts of damage, but every MMO on the planet currently, when you're in a boss fight, aside from one boss fight I'm aware of in Final Fantasy XIV, where literally the entire boss fight is puzzles, and if you survive to the end, the boss dies. But other than that, every boss fight ends when the boss's hit points reduce to 0. So DPS is very useful there. In a tabletop RPG, that's not the case. There are tons of different ways to end encounters in general. Even boss encounters where the DM designed it for it to end when the hit points of the boss are 0. You can still end those in different ways in a tabletop RPG. So strictly focusing on which class can do the most of the damage doesn't help. Something a lot of people don't realize, the base PHB Ranger can do a crap ton of damage. If you exploit things correctly, like just using the PHB and then the DMG for some magic items, just doing that, if you exploit it correctly, the base Ranger can out damage paladins. Now, you have to do some very specific things and get the Ranger things like Flame Tongue or Icebrand weapons that give you additional damage per shot. And then you also have to have dual wielding and the dual wielding fighting style, and you have to make sure Hunter's Mark is always on. And then you also have to get a couple different mages to cast things like Elemental Weapon on both of your weapons. You do a crap ton of damage. Does that mean that the base PHB Ranger is the best class in the game? No, it was horrible. The base PHB Ranger is one of the most unbalanced classes in the PHB. It was very poorly designed. If you know how to exploit it, you can do crazy, crazy stuff. And I have seen people do it. Especially if you play around with multi-classing and things like that, it can be very, very broken very quickly. That doesn't mean it's balanced, and neither does how much damage a class do factor at all into which class is the best. Well, I guess I can't say at all. It factors, but it's a very small part, because tabletop RPGs are meant to be played. They're meant to tell stories, and stories, sometimes a bad guy wins, and sometimes the good guys die, and those are not bad stories because bad things happen to the good guys or good things happen to the bad guys. They're good stories if they're engaging and they make you want to finish this story. Whether or not the character you love the most survives to the end, you want to know the ending. And so going back to Amy, she talked about how her character would do things like would make selfish decisions. Again, I don't know what this is referencing because I've only watched the first 3 episodes. And if she did have an incredible, selfish thing she did in one of those episodes, I didn't catch it. But it did instantly remind me of, here's a small spoiler warning for the first campaign, which is 5 years old now. Vex steals a broom. Vex steals a magic item for one of the guest characters, and everyone got pissed off because that is a cardinal rule of RPGs: is you don't steal from the party. It's just a dick move. And Vex 100% stole an item from one of the guest NPCs that was only ever on the show, I think, for one episode, never came back. And so, yeah, everyone considered that a dick move. It's possible Amy's character did something like that or something else. And they mentioned that tactically, she didn't contribute much to the rest of the party. And so she specifically mentions, I'm going to go, I'm actually going to go back in here to find something that Amy said. I think I'll just start here. Opal is the opposite of an optimized game-winning machine. She can be a bad teammate and isn't that useful in a tactical sense. That's how I built her. I believe that's all the details she goes into here. And I would assume that's 100% true. Again, I think I've only seen one combat in the episodes that I've watched, and I was not blown away with Opal as her character. I was not blown away with what Opal did in combat as far as mechanics were involved. I was more watching for the story that was developing and the things like this. And with her being a new player and my history of teaching running tables of almost exclusively new players for years, I'm very, very used to watching new players just kind of fumble and foible around, not doing super well because they don't understand how things like talking about action economy within a new player is kind of like talking about viscosity of a sauce to a brand new cook. Is it something that's important? Yeah, if you get to the real high-end cooking and stuff like that, exactly how thick or thin your sauce is and how it interacts with things on the plate is very, very important. But a brand new cook doesn't care. They care that their sauce is thick enough to go where it's supposed to and not go where it's not supposed to. That's it. So yeah, she played a quote-unquote suboptimal character. And the people in chat were really, really pissed off about it. And that is a mindset that is extremely common in your 3rd edition era players. And I want to explain why that is. And why it didn't apply then, and it doesn't really apply now to the majority of players. These are just the most vocal. One of the people that creates D&D, one of the Wizards of the Coast people, I can't remember who it was. Again, names are hard for me. Talked about after 5th edition had been out for a year to two, maybe not even that, maybe just a year. No, it was a year or two. Anyway, they were talking about how D&D used to have a really thriving, and still does, have a really thriving online presence. Back in 3rd edition days, it was on message boards. And nowadays, it's on everywhere. But they still have D&D message boards, and Reddit is effectively a message board type system. An old school 3rd edition D&D message boards, people would post character builds. And it's actually still incredibly common on Reddit to find character build posts. That's part of what a D&D Deep Dive is it's tips for character building. And what a character build post is they would literally post the stats of their characters, their levels, and then they would talk about what they could do with those abilities. Oh, I'm, a fighter 3, rogue 7, wizard 2. And I can do this, and this, which means I can do this much damage. That's how D&D was spoken about in the 3rd edition days, and still is by 3rd edition players and by Pathfinder players, because Pathfinder is 3.75 D&D. That's what it is. It uses the same. It literally uses the third edition rules. It uses the free version of the third edition rules, then adds some more things on there for quality of life. So if you go to Pathfinder sites, you will see character builds everywhere. When they're talking about that, they will list their characters. I had a conversation with someone when I was one of my D&D deep dives. I did a thing on Pathfinder 2nd edition because I got all these books for 2nd edition, which is still a really interesting system to me. I'm not particularly fond of it because it's overly complicated. But I had someone come into my chat who was wonderful and actually made videos on their own channel talking about character builds, and they literally flashed character builds in their video. They literally had pictures of character sheets and character stats because that's how 3rd edition was played. 3rd edition was literally you trying to beat the game systems. That's where the conflict in the 3rd edition came from, because when you built your characters, quote unquote, correctly, there wasn't anything in the monster manual that could take them down. There really wasn't. 3rd edition, because of the power creep that eventually came in and the features creep that came in very, very quickly. Overpowered characters in 3rd edition weren't just common, they were the norm. And if you had a normally powered character, you were at an extreme disadvantage. If you had a poorly built character, which was not a difficult thing to do in 3rd edition, you simply couldn't play after a certain level. 3rd edition was built for min-maxers. And because of that, it got to the point where you had to min-max in order to play. And the same is true about Pathfinder, to the point that at one of the stores that I ran 5th edition games for, I ran their Adventures League program for them. They actually almost kicked out the Pathfinder Society people because they were so hostile to new players, because new players might come to the table with a suboptimal character. And this literally happened at one of the tables that a friend of mine was next to. He was doing Pathfinder stuff because he played both. And this is a literal conversation they had. Was this guy sat down and said, "Hey, I want to play this game." Or wait, no, this actually happened to him. He sat down and he had this really cool character concept. He's like, "I'm going to play this guy and he's going to be like this and this." He said, "Oh, you chose the wrong spells." He goes, "Oh, no, it fits with the character concept because blah, 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 blah." He said, No. You have to choose this spell, this spell, this spell. And you chose the wrong focus here. You need to use these feats, this. Oh, you can't play that character. What are you talking about? The character, I made it according to the rules. They said, "No, you can't play that character. You're going to ruin the game." And my friend goes, "What are you talking about? Like, literally show me what rule I violated." He said, "You didn't violate any rules. That character sucks. And you're going to screw us all over. So if you want to play that character, play it somewhere else." Because my friend hadn't min-maxed. And the reason this Pathfinder Society group nearly got kicked out was there was these customers walking around this shop, and they saw the Pathfinder Society players playing. They came over and go, "This is really cool." You know, "Yeah, thanks." Then got back to playing. Like, "Hey, can we play? Do you have a character?" "Well, no, but I'd love to learn." "Listen, we're playing a game here, and if you come in, you're just going to break it. So you need to leave." And the owner came over at that point, and he helped the customers and helped them find something. And he came back to the table and said, "Listen, you ever treat one of my customers that way again, I don't care how much money you've spent in my store. You're never setting foot in here again, and I will never allow Pathfinder Society games run in any of my stores," because they own like 3 or 4 different stores around the greater Milwaukee area. And the Pathfinder Society people were shocked. And again, I did the convention circuit, and Adventure League stuff was always right next to the Pathfinder stuff. And Pathfinder people were, Pathfinder Society specifically, were brutal. You had to have a min-maxed character, or you were not allowed to sit at the table. And if that meant you never played Pathfinder Society, fine, more loot for me. Now, Pathfinder Society is not... I'm actually not sure as far as how many people play Pathfinder versus how many play Pathfinder Society. I'm not sure if they're the majority or a minority as far as the entire player base. I do know Adventurers League players, which is the D&D 5th edition equivalent, are a minority of people compared to people that play Dungeons and Dragons. And Living Forgotten Realms, which was the equivalent of the 3rd edition, was a minority of people compared to all people that played 3rd edition. So I can only assume Pathfinder Society represents a minority of people. But that was how 3rd edition was run, was class builds. That's how you talked about the 3rd edition, was class builds and mechanics. Going back to what this D&D guy said, he's been watching, and again, this is just a couple years after 5th edition came out, he was looking at 5th edition messaging boards and Reddits and Twitter and things like that. People, when they post about their characters, they don't post stats. They go, oh, my character is a barbarian follower of Ogma, and he's a totem barbarian, and you know, he did this really cool thing where he and the paladin kind of teamed up to stop this other evil guy, and they tell the story of what's happening to their character without really mentioning the mechanics much. They would mention mechanics every so often because that's part of the game, but the focus was on this story they were telling. And that's one of the biggest difference between 5th edition and 3rd edition, and basically your crunch-heavy rules games like 3rd edition and your more free-flowing games like 5th edition. 5th edition is built to help you tell stories. So any complexity that gets in the way of you just having fun and telling the story you want, they got rid of. Really, really easy example is dual wielding. In 3rd edition, in order to dual wield, it was remarkably complicated. First things first, you could dual wield at first level. You didn't. The reason being is in order to dual wield, what would happen is you would have a main hand weapon and an offhand weapon. And every weapon had a bonus to your attack rolls. And every class that was supposed to use weapons would have this thing as they leveled up called their basic attack bonus, which basically as you leveled up, you would just add additional numbers to your attack rolls. So as you leveled up, you'd be able to hit higher AC things. So if you dual wielded, what would happen is you took a penalty for dual wielding, because it meant you could attack faster because you could attack twice. But it meant that you would take this penalty to your attack rolls, which the base penalty for attack rolls was your main hand, which you had a main hand and an offhand. You could be left or right-handed, I believe. But you had a main hand and an offhand. Your main hand, you would have a -4 to your attack rolls. And your offhand, you would have a -8 to your attack rolls. Now, at first level, you didn't have a basic attack bonus, so you really were only adding your ability modifier, which meant that you generally didn't have much higher, and the modifier of the weapon itself, which is generally only +2 or +3. So normally, your attack rolls at first level were only going to be a +5 or a +6, which is in line with 5th edition. They just changed proficiency bonus to giving different weapons different attack bonuses. So if you dual wielded, that would mean your main hand weapon was now a +1 to attack rolls, and your offhand weapon was going to be -3 or -2 to your attack rolls, which meant you generally weren't hitting with your offhand weapon at all, and you weren't hitting very often with your main hand weapon. Now, there are ways to change that. If you used light weapons, it would reduce the penalty on both by -2. So that would mean be -2 on your main hand and -6 on your offhand. So a little bit nicer. Then you could take the dual wielding feats, which would reduce both of those to -2 again. That would mean now it was 0. You could just use your normal attack bonus, and then your offhand was going to be a -4. Then you could take improved dual wielding, which reduced them by another 2. And then you could also take ambidexterity, which is another feat, which would mean both your hands were dominant hands. You didn't have an offhand penalty, and then you would actually have positive modifiers for your offhanded attack. That's how dual wielding worked in 3rd edition. In 5th edition, dual wielding are the weapons both light? Yes. Okay. You can have one in each hand. You use your action to make the attack action to attack with your main hand. Use your bonus action to attack with your offhand weapon. And if you do hit with the offhand weapon, you can't add your ability modifier to the damage. That's it. Doesn't change the attack roll. The attack roll is the same with both of them. All it does is it changes how much damage you can do with the offhand. And if you take the dual wielding fighting style, that gets rid of the penalty on your offhand of damage. So you do the same amount of damage. You're just limited to light weapons. There's a feat you can take that allows you to use non-light one-handed weapons, and also gives you a bonus to your AC, because that's how feats work in 5th edition. And that is the big difference between 3rd and 5th edition. Is 3rd edition, the conflict in 3rd edition is you are fighting against the game. You are trying to figure out the rules well enough so that you can get, you can beat the game, beat the systems of the game, and do what you want. 5th edition, you do what you want. And there's just enough limitations so that you don't have people being able to exploit systems. Like if there were no limitations on dual wielding, you could dual wield anything, then every character would run around wielding dual great axes, because being able to do 2d12 damage instead of 2d6 damage on a turn is always better. So to bring this back to Amy's, and I ramble a lot and go weird places. That's how my mind works. So sorry that this takes so long to get back to that. But what happened to Amy is she got, and again, when the guy from Wizards of the Coast was talking about, this is how people talk about D&D now, is they talk about the stories they can tell instead of the mechanics that they beat. That's true for a majority of players. However, there's still a minority that post character builds. There's still a minority that thinks if you're not optimizing your character, then you're committing a cardinal sin. They're a remarkably small minority in the D&D 5th edition community, but they are by far the most vocal community on the internet that I'm willing to call out in a video. There are more vocal minorities on the internet that I believe that are significantly more toxic, but they scare me, so I won't mention them. And so what happened was Amy went into chat, which chat on Twitch, specifically the chat for Critical Role, is not a good place. Now, before people, like really, really nice people, that get very, very defensive when I attack the things that they take solace in, before people go, no, those are a small minority and blah, 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 blah. No, the chat on Critical Role are wonderful, amazing people. That may be your experience, but I've actually watched Critical Role live since it started. I was in chat and Matt addressed me in chat during the first game. I know what Critical Role chat is like, and I've watched it evolve through all of Campaign 1, through most of Campaign 2. I fell out of Campaign 2 around like episode 100-ish, because again, anxiety got bad, and I've seen it during Exandria Unlimited. Chat is not fun. Most people watch Critical Role without chat on because it is violently aggressive, let's call it. And so what Amy experienced was that very vocal minority that are still in the third edition mindset of the game is actively working against you and you have to beat the game. You have to beat the systems in order to do what you want. Fifth edition isn't like that. And quote-unquote suboptimal characters aren't really suboptimal anymore. And that is the entire point of D&D Deep Dive, is to show you how you can play any character, any subclass you want, and still feel like you're contributing to the game. That's why I don't just focus on subclasses. I've done feats. I had a whole series on races and how to use their abilities. I did an entire series on backgrounds. The whole point of D&D Deep Dive is the idea that every class is viable, every subclass is viable, and every choice you make is viable. Doesn't matter why you make the choice. If that's the choice you want to make, I'm going to help you find a way to make that choice and make it feel impactful. That's why at the beginning of every D&D Deep Dive, the whole spiel that I say every single time, hey, welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you make the most of your choices. I chose those words very, very specifically because I want people to know that they can make whatever choices they want. You shouldn't be punished for making the choice that you want to make in a game. Unless the choice you are making, you shouldn't be punished simply for making a choice. Your choice should have consequences. But in general, those consequences shouldn't be punishments unless it is a system within your game world that is designed to be punitive. Like going to jail for murdering someone. That is a punishment because you did something illegal. But the game itself shouldn't punish you for making choices. Even if they're bad, there should just be consequences to your choices. And as long as you're willing to accept those consequences, every choice you make is valid. And it is only no longer a valid choice when you are no longer willing to accept the consequences of that choice. And again, going back to Amy, she unfortunately found out that the gatekeepers in D&D are the min-maxers. In general, those are the biggest gatekeepers in the entire game. And a lot of people don't. I don't know a lot. I have had quite a few conversations with people that go, well, 3rd edition wasn't that bad, or Pathfinder isn't that bad, or Pathfinder is the single greatest RPG on the planet, and you simply just don't understand how to play it. I'm not going to get into an argument about that. But I can tell you from my own experience, when I see gatekeeping, I generally can look up the person that is gatekeeping and find that they play either 3rd edition or Pathfinder. Almost 100% of the time. That's where the gatekeepers could come from. Because again, in those systems, the system punishes you for not min-maxing. Pathfinder Society, the reason it's as toxic as it is because it heavily punishes you for not min-maxing. To the point where if you play poorly, you lose your character. A character you may have been playing for years. If you have one party member that plays poorly and your character dies, which happens a lot in Pathfinder Society games, from what I have been told by people that play it regularly, Death is not an uncommon thing. So that means if a poorly made character shows up at your table, the game is going to be more difficult because it's based on how many players you have at the table. But if one of the players is not picking up their weight, they are just adding difficulty, which could result in you losing your character. The same thing is true about 3rd edition in general. The game, most GMs are going to balance the game around how many players you have and what levels they are. If you haven't built your character correctly, it doesn't matter how min-max the rest of the party is. You are going to be having more difficult enemies that can take more damage, but your party as a whole is going to be doing less damage and can take less damage and has to waste more of their resources on a character that's not optimized. So I'm not saying these are evil, disgusting, horrible people that are gatekeeping this. No. That's how they were trained when they first learned to play. And earlier editions of the D&D were even more so. Original D&D is brutal in how difficult it is, and the amount of save or die mechanics are crazy. D&D First Edition and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons were a little bit kinder, but were still rough. Second Edition became a lot kinder, to be blunt, but still did emphasize a little bit of min-maxing in order to get what you wanted. 3rd Edition was so number heavy and so crunchy and was so complicated. Min-maxing was a necessity, and so that's how these people were taught. And in Pathfinder Society, min-maxing isn't the normal, it is the required way you play. There is no other way to play. You will not be allowed to sit at the table if you do not have a min-maxed character. That's how it works. And so seeing these people as they get into 5th edition, because it's a good game, and it's fun, and it will provide them with something that Pathfinder doesn't provide them with, they will get in and they will treat it the same way that they treat the other games that they've played. If you're not min-maxing, you're destroying the game. And that's unfortunately what happened to Amy. And I hope, and I think this will be true because she's got a lot of really wonderful people around her that were teaching her the game. People like Matt and Ashley and Liam and and Sam especially, because Sam literally built his character in Pathfinder. For their first campaign, they started in Pathfinder. Sam literally asked, what is the worst race and class combination I can have? And they said gnome bard. And that's what Sam played. He went the sabotage route from day one. So being surrounded by these people that understand that you can still have fun and still play the game without having to min-max means there's a really good chance that if she continues playing tabletop RPGs, which I hope she does, she's not going to run into or she's not going to change her mindset of, oh, I always have to min-max. Despite the fact that she mentioned in her thing here's another quote from her. Had I understand the tabletop RPG culture coming in, I would have known the objective is story and mission. I brought pizza to the barbecue. Most folks are like, cool, I like pizza. While some are like, we ordered potato salad. And that's what she kind of felt after seeing this, is that she was playing the game wrong. Because she focused on story more than mechanics, and story over quote-unquote winning. She got attacked for it. And not really attacked personally. At least that's not what I'm reading here. But or actually, no, because she does say that people also think that she's a spoiled, selfish person because that's what her character was. So yeah, like she got attacked because she didn't min-max. Which again, happens. I myself have been attacked at conventions for not min-maxing my character. It's not that I don't know how to. I think anyone that has watched any of my D&D deep dives know I know this system really well, and I can min-max like a mother. I just don't enjoy doing it. I enjoy writing stories. I enjoy single class characters. I know, I don't multi-class my characters. I'm horrible. I like playing single class characters. I think they're more fun. That isn't to say I don't have multi-class characters. I do have a super min-max character who is he's a warlock, second level hexblade warlock, fourth level shadow sorcerer, Asmar, and yeah, I call him my spell slinger because he literally, his entire thing is he fires Eldritch Blasts and then quickens them so that he can get, he's only level 6, I think. Yeah, he's only level 6 right now. So he can only shoot 4 a turn. But that's still 4 attacks per turn. With Hex. So, yeah, that's a lot. And then when he gets to 11 level, he will have 6 attacks per turn. And then when he gets to I think it's 17th, he will have 8 attacks per turn. And so I built the entire character around. So yeah, it's not that I can't min-max. I can. I just don't do it much. And you don't have to play the game. I literally have quite a few campaigns where I have players who are playing really kind of quote-unquote poorly optimized characters that are having a blast. And have certain moments where their character is the most important character on the board. Tactically. You don't have to min-max to be quote-unquote good at the game. You don't have to do that. And it's sad that Amy has had to go through this. But to be perfectly honest, it's kind of par for the course. If you're going to get into tabletop RPGs at this point, you will get attacked for making a suboptimal choice. It's just how it works. As much as the min-maxers are a small minority, they're still everywhere. The tabletop RPG community has become massive with how many different RPGs are out there now, and how many different styles. It is a massive globe-wide phenomenon. So you are going to run into people that are going to say, well, you did that wrong. Your fun is wrong. They talked about this all the way back in the first series of Critical Role, was people getting mad at Will Friedle's character, Cashaw, I think, because he used a spear and a shield as a cleric, and that's not right. That's not the way you play a cleric. And he got told your fun is wrong, and that's where that phrase kind of took meaning of. If you're unaware, if someone just out of the blue, when you're criticizing how they're playing their game, they say, oh, your fun is wrong. They're referencing Critical Role, because during one of the interview things, Will Friedle specifically said, yeah, they're basically saying your fun is wrong. How you are having fun is the wrong kind of fun. And that's no. All fun, if you're having fun, you're not hurting anyone else, you're doing it right. And so anytime you see that phrase, if you weren't familiar with it, they're basically saying, oh, you have decided that you are the arbiter of fun, and you get to decide what is good fun and what is bad fun. And so if you see that phrase coming up, it's not a compliment. It's them going, yeah, your fun is wrong. My fun is the right fun. Yours is the wrong fun in this imaginary world where nothing we do will ever affect the outside world. Me not using my bonus action will not change a single thing happening outside that door right now. Yes, my fun is wrong. Yours is the right fun. Mine is the wrong fun. So anyway, yeah, I know I ramble and all this stuff, but I guess the main idea behind this is, Amy, if you've watched this, you need to make better choices. Because there are many better things you could be doing with your time than watching this crazy stuttering moron that can't leave his home talk about something that you apparently have already mastered. But if you are watching this, or if anyone lets her know, I'm super happy that you made a quote-unquote suboptimal character. Because that means the reason you built your character was to tell a story, which is the reason tabletop RPGs exist, is to tell stories. Now, whether that story is how you beat the system to do something that allowed you to roll 400 dice at the same time, or whether it was a story about how your little gnome bard was able to counterspell the most evil being in existence to win the game. Doesn't matter. They're still stories. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with people telling you your fun is wrong. Unfortunately, it's par for the course. And I'm extremely happy that you were able to experience this while surrounded by people like Matt and Liam and Ashley and Marisha and Laura and Travis. And I'm missing someone. I didn't know it. Oh, and Sam, of course. Because they're wonderful, they're supportive, and they will let you have the fun that you want to have. And I hope that means that when, not if, you continue playing tabletop RPGs, whether they are streamed, whether they're in your private home, whether they're in your mind, that you get to tell the stories that you want to tell. For the rest of you that are not famous voice actors that are playing with the #1 tabletop stream on Twitch, I hope this video has helped you to realize that your fun isn't not wrong. And I hope D&D Deep Dive helps you to make the choices you want instead of the choices you feel you have to make in order to play the game. I hope D&D Deep Dive allows you to tell the stories you want to tell, because that's the whole purpose of it. Anyway, that's all for me. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.